What happens when a calm, famously private movie star walks onto a daytime talk show and refuses to bend when the pressure turns personal? Make sure to subscribe to Final Take Files, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The applause is loud as Keanu Reeves walks out onto the set of The View. He gives that familiar, slightly shy smile, waves once, and hugs Whoopi Goldberg before taking his seat. The energy is warm at first. Comfortable. The audience clearly adores him. Whoopi starts light. Every time you come here, people lose their minds. The crowd cheers again. Keanu chuckles. That's very kind. Thank you for having me. They talk about his new film for a few minutes, training, long hours on set, how he keeps things grounded. It feels easy. Natural. Then Whoopi shifts. You've always been pretty quiet outside of your work, she says. Not big on political statements. Not loud on social media. Keanu nods once. I try to focus on what I actually do. But we're in a time, Whoopi continues, where people expect public figures to be clear, to say where they stand. A soft murmur moves through the audience. I think people should expect that from leaders, Keanu replies calmly. I'm an actor. Actors have always used their voices, Whoopi pushes back. Art and politics aren't separate. That's true, he says. But not every actor handles that responsibility the same way. A few claps break out. She leans forward slightly. When something major happens in the world, do you feel any responsibility to speak publicly? I feel a responsibility to help, he says. I donate. I support organizations. I show up privately. I just don't think everything needs to be a headline. The audience reaction is mixed, some applause, some silence. But silence can send a message too, Whoopi says. I don't see it as silence, Keanu responds. I see it as choosing not to turn complex issues into short statements. That line gets stronger applause. You're one of the most recognizable people in the world, she says. That influence matters. I know, he replies. And I try to carry it carefully. How? She asks. By not pretending to have expertise I don't have. If I speak publicly without fully understanding something, that feels irresponsible. But people aren't asking for policy analysis, Whoopi says. They're asking for solidarity. And I give it, he answers. Just not always with cameras involved. That earns louder applause. She studies him. Some would say doing it privately protects your image. There's a shift in the room. My image has never been the goal, he says evenly. But you benefit from it. I'm aware of that, he nods. I just don't want to perform outrage. Or perform compassion. The word perform lands hard. The audience reacts immediately. You think other people are performing? She asks. No, he says firmly. I'm saying if I did it because it's expected, that would be performance, for me. There's a pause. You understand why some people might feel disappointed by that, Whoopi says. I do, he answers. But I can't base my decisions on avoiding disappointment. Applause grows a little stronger now. She shifts again. There's also the argument that being able to opt out publicly is a form of privilege. The word hangs heavy. The audience reacts. I understand that perspective, Keanu says slowly. I've experienced hardship. I don't feel removed from struggle. But I don't believe being loud is automatically the most helpful option. Visibility empowers people, Whoopi counters. It can, he agrees. It can also distract from people who've dedicated their lives to organizing. That draws one of the biggest reactions so far. She doesn't back off. Young fans look up to you. Don't they deserve clarity? They deserve honesty, he replies. And honesty for me is saying I'm not deeply informed on every issue. So it's about expertise, she asks. Or about taking a moral stance. Keanu pauses. I think morality is complicated, he says carefully. Reducing it to short public statements can flatten it. The room grows quiet. You don't think your voice matters in these conversations? Whoopi asks. I think it matters, he says. I just don't think it should outweigh the voices of people living it every day. The applause this time is more confident. She folds her hands. If something divisive happened tomorrow, would you still stay quiet? I would respond in a way that feels truthful, he says. Not reactive. Reactive shows urgency, she counters. And sometimes, he replies calmly, it spreads misinformation. That line hits. The audience reacts loudly. The tone at the table has completely shifted now. No more promotional energy. It's direct. Some would argue, Whoopi says slowly, that when you have your kind of platform, choosing not to draw a public line is still drawing one. The audience goes nearly silent. Keanu straightens slightly in his chair. I draw lines in my life, he says evenly. I just don't draw them for television. The reaction is immediate, applause mixed with tension. Whoopi looks at him steadily. The warmth from earlier is gone, replaced with something more serious. And it's clear the conversation is only getting started. The applause doesn't completely settle after that last line. A few people are still clapping, others are looking around, waiting to see how Whoopi Goldberg responds. She doesn't smile this time. So let me understand you, she says, folding her hands on the table. You're saying your boundaries matter more than the expectations that come with influence. It's direct. Not hostile, but direct. Keanu Reeves doesn't rush. I'm saying boundaries are part of being responsible, he answers calmly. If I cross into conversations I'm not prepared for, that's not helpful. But what makes you think you're not prepared? Whoopi asks quickly. You're an intelligent man. You read. You live in the world. I do, he nods. But reading headlines isn't the same as living policy. I don't sit with lawmakers. I don't sit with activists every day. I don't want to reduce their work to a quote from me. There's a low murmur from the audience. Whoopi leans back slightly. Nobody's asking you to replace activists. I know, he says gently. But sometimes celebrity commentary becomes the story instead of the issue itself. That gets a noticeable reaction. A few louder claps. She tilts her head. Or it amplifies the issue. It can, he agrees. It depends on how it's done. So is it fear, she asks. Fear of getting it wrong? That question shifts the energy again. Keanu pauses for a second. It's awareness, he says. I've seen how quickly things spiral when people speak without thinking. I don't want to add to that. But staying silent can also be seen as avoiding accountability, Whoopi replies. I'm accountable for my actions, he says. Not for meeting every public expectation. The audience reacts, some applause, some tight silence. She presses again. Public figures have shaped cultural shifts before. Musicians, actors, artists. They've stood up during difficult times. And I respect them, Keanu says. Deeply. But respect doesn't mean imitation. That line lands clean. Whoopi looks at him carefully. You don't think you're being a little too comfortable? The word comfortable hangs there. He shakes his head slightly. Comfortable would be saying what people want to hear. A few gasps. A few claps. She raises her eyebrows. So you think speaking out is just telling people what they want to hear? No, he says evenly. I think sometimes there's pressure to say something quickly so no one questions you. That's different from meaningful engagement. The audience is fully locked in now. Whoopi leans forward. Let's talk about that pressure. Where do you think it comes from? Social media, he says without hesitation. Headlines. The speed of outrage. There's an expectation that if you don't post within hours, you don't care. Some audience members clap in agreement. But people are emotional in real time, Whoopi counters. They want to know who stands with them. And I stand with people in real ways, he replies. I just don't always broadcast it. She nods slowly, but her tone remains firm. But broadcasting has power. So does humility, he responds. That line draws one of the louder reactions so far. Whoopi doesn't interrupt this time. She lets the applause breathe before speaking again. You've built a reputation for being kind. Generous. Grounded. Doesn't that give you even more credibility if you did speak publicly? It might, he says. But credibility also comes from staying in your lane. The audience reacts, a mix of approval and discomfort. Who decides your lane? She asks sharply. I do, he answers. There's a ripple through the crowd at that. See, Whoopi says, that's where some people struggle. Because when you're as influential as you are, it doesn't always feel like a private lane. I understand that, he replies. But if I let public demand dictate every boundary, I stop being an individual. I become a symbol. And what's wrong with being a symbol for something good? She asks. Nothing, he says calmly. As long as it's authentic. Not assigned. The tension is steady now. Controlled but undeniable. She looks at him closely. So if tomorrow there's an issue that directly impacts the film industry, your colleagues, your community, would you speak then? Yes, he says immediately. That answer surprises the audience. You can hear it. Because that's within your lane, she asks. Yes, he says. Because I understand it. I live it. So it's proximity, she says. It's responsibility, he corrects gently. There's a pause. Some would say responsibility expands with influence, Whoopi says. And some would say influence should be handled carefully, he replies. The back-and-forth rhythm is sharper now. She shifts slightly in her chair. Do you ever worry history will judge silence? Keanu doesn't hesitate this time. I worry more about noise drowning out people who've been fighting long before cameras showed up. That earns sustained applause. Whoopi lets it settle. You're very measured, she says. I try to be, he replies. Because you don't want to be misunderstood? Because I don't want to misunderstand others. That line changes the mood again, softer but firm. The audience reacts warmly to that one. Whoopi studies him for a moment. You know this conversation isn't going away. The expectation isn't going away. I know, he says. And you're comfortable with people criticizing you for it? I'm not comfortable with it, he admits. But I accept it. That honesty draws a different kind of reaction, quieter but respectful. She nods slowly. So your stance is, help quietly, speak carefully, and accept the backlash. That's part of it, he says. And keep learning. Learning, she repeats. Yes. Before speaking. There's another pause. The atmosphere isn't explosive, but it's undeniably tense. This isn't promotional television anymore. It's philosophical. Personal. Whoopi glances briefly toward the audience, then back at him. Some people watching right now are going to say this is a cop-out. Keanu nods. They're allowed to. And that doesn't bother you? It does, he says honestly. But not enough to pretend. A few scattered claps turn into a wave of applause. Whoopi exhales softly through her nose, almost a half-laugh. You're not making this easy. He smiles faintly. I'm not trying to make it hard. She looks at him directly again. So just to be clear, she says, voice steady, you're not going to change that approach anytime soon. Keanu meets her gaze. No, he says calmly. The audience reacts, louder this time, divided but energized. And the conversation, instead of cooling down, feels like it's about to go even deeper. The applause fades, but the tension doesn't. It lingers at the table. Whoopi Goldberg looks out at the audience for a moment, then back at Keanu Reeves. You know what's interesting, she says. You keep using words like careful, responsible, measured. And I respect that. But sometimes movements aren't careful. They're urgent. The audience claps at that. Keanu nods slowly. Urgency has its place. So does visibility, she replies quickly. He doesn't interrupt. He lets her finish. When something is happening in real time, Whoopi continues, people want to know who stands with them. Not behind the scenes. Not privately. Publicly. There's a strong round of applause. Keanu waits until it settles. And I understand that desire, he says. But I don't think public support always has to look the same. She leans in. But when it doesn't look visible, it can feel absent. That line lands. He nods once. I hear that. Do you? She asks, sharper now. Because to someone struggling, to someone protesting, to someone scared, silence from influential people can feel like abandonment. The audience reacts. Louder applause, a few, that's right, murmurs. Keanu's expression tightens slightly. Not defensive. Just serious. I would never want anyone to feel abandoned, he says. That's not my intention. But impact matters more than intention, Whoopi counters immediately. The crowd responds with a mix of claps and murmurs. There's a beat. You're right, Keanu says. Impact does matter. That answer shifts the room. It's not resistance. It's acknowledgement. So if the impact of silence feels harmful, she continues, doesn't that make you reconsider? He pauses longer this time. It makes me reflect, he says carefully. But reflection doesn't always mean changing direction instantly. She looks at him closely. Why not? Because reacting out of pressure can create shallow engagement, he replies. And shallow engagement can be more damaging than quiet support. Some applause breaks out again. Whoopi shakes her head slightly. You keep going back to this idea that public support is shallow. I'm not saying it is, he responds evenly. I'm saying it can be, if it's rushed. Or, she says, it can inspire millions. And inspiration is powerful, he agrees. But it has to be rooted in knowledge. The back and forth is sharper now. Less space between responses. Whoopi gestures lightly with her hand. You've played roles that deal with morality, justice, good versus evil. Audiences connect you with those themes. Keanu gives a faint smile. That's fiction. But perception isn't fiction, she replies. The audience reacts again. Do you think, she continues, that your brand, your reputation for kindness, makes people expect more from you? He nods. Probably. And that doesn't weigh on you. It does, he admits. The honesty quiets the room. It weighs on me because I don't want to let people down, he says. But I also don't want to speak beyond my understanding just to maintain an image. Is it about image, Whoopi asks, or about control? That question hits differently. Keanu blinks once, considering it. What do you mean? I mean, she says, is choosing silence a way to control the narrative? To stay above the conflict? The audience reacts, a ripple of tension. No, he says calmly. It's about not inserting myself into conflicts that aren't mine to center. But when you're that famous, she presses, everything you do centers you. There's a murmur of agreement. He leans forward slightly now, his tone still measured but firmer. That's exactly why I'm cautious, he says. If I say one sentence, it becomes the headline. Meanwhile, people who've dedicated years to the issue get 2 lines at the bottom. The audience applauds strongly at that. Whoopi waits for the noise to die down. So you're protecting activists from being overshadowed? I'm trying not to overshadow them, he replies. She tilts her head. Or are you protecting yourself from backlash? A few gasps. Keanu doesn't react visibly, but his voice is a touch firmer now. Backlash comes either way, he says. You're watching it happen right now. That earns a wave of applause, louder than before. Whoopi gives a small nod. Fair. There's a brief silence. The kind that only happens on live television when both sides know the conversation has crossed into something real. Let me ask you something personal, she says. Okay, he replies. Has there ever been a moment where you thought, maybe I should say something publicly, and chose not to? The audience leans in. Keanu exhales slowly. Yes. A quiet reaction spreads through the room. And why didn't you? She asks. Because I realized I was reacting emotionally, he says. And I didn't want to speak from anger. Or fear. Some people clap at that. Others stay quiet. So emotion disqualifies a statement? Whoopi asks. No, he says. But for me, it clouds clarity. She studies him again. Do you think clarity always requires distance? Sometimes, he says. But distance can look like detachment. I don't feel detached, he replies. Feelings and perception aren't the same, she says. There's a pause. That's true, he acknowledges. The audience murmurs. So what would it take, Whoopi continues, for you to step up publicly on something outside the film industry? Keanu thinks about it. Deep understanding, he says. Long-term commitment. Not just a statement. So not a tweet, she says. He gives a faint smile. Definitely not a tweet. The audience laughs lightly, easing the tension for a moment. But here's the thing, she adds, serious again. Not everyone has the luxury of long-term contemplation. Some people need allies in the moment. And they deserve them, he says. So why not be one of them? She asks directly. The room is completely silent now. Keanu looks straight at her. Because being an ally publicly without being deeply embedded in the work can sometimes become symbolic instead of structural, he says slowly. And symbolism doesn't always protect people. That line draws one of the strongest reactions yet, sustained applause, mixed with a few uneasy expressions. Whoopi lets it play out. You're drawing a hard line, she says. I'm drawing a personal one, he responds. And you're comfortable with the criticism that comes with that? He pauses. No, he says honestly. But I accept it. The honesty lands again. She leans back in her chair. You know this is bigger than you, she says. I do, he replies. And yet you're still choosing this path. Yes. The audience reaction is louder now, divided, energized, fully engaged. The friendly tone from the beginning of the segment is gone. This isn't small talk anymore. It's principle versus expectation. Whoopi looks at him for a long moment. Some people are going to say you shut this conversation down, she says carefully. That you're refusing to meet the moment. Keanu shakes his head slightly. I'm not shutting it down, he says evenly. I'm just not letting it define me. The audience erupts, applause, murmurs, tension all at once. And it's clear the discussion has reached a point where neither of them is backing off. The applause lingers, but it's not the loud, chaotic kind anymore. It's divided. Some people are fully on Keanu's side. Others are clearly siding with Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi looks back at Keanu Reeves and nods slowly. You're very steady, she says. I'm trying to be, he replies. Because this could have gone somewhere else. It doesn't need to, he says calmly. There's a quiet reaction from the audience, not explosive, but engaged. Whoopi folds her hands. I don't think you're uncaring. I think people just struggle with the idea that someone with your reach chooses not to use it loudly. I get that, Keanu says. And I respect that perspective. But you're not changing your approach. No, he answers. No hesitation. No softening. The audience reacts again, a mix of applause and murmurs. Do you think this changes how people see you? She asks. Maybe, he admits. But I'd rather be clear than strategic. That line hits hard. Strong applause. She gives a small half-smile. You know some people will say you avoided the moment. I didn't avoid it, he says evenly. I just didn't perform it. There's that word again. The audience reacts immediately. Compassion shouldn't become content, he adds. That line gets one of the biggest reactions of the entire segment. Whoopi studies him for a second, then nods. Well, you didn't dodge. You answered. Thank you, he says. And even if we don't fully agree, she continues, that's what this table is for. Applause fills the studio again as the segment wraps. But once the cameras cut, the real storm starts. Clips from The View hit social media within minutes. Short edits of him saying, I draw lines in my life. I just don't draw them for television. Another of him saying, compassion shouldn't become content. The internet splits fast. Some praise him for staying calm under pressure. They call him thoughtful and authentic. Others say he sidestepped responsibility. That choosing not to speak publicly is still a powerful statement. Commentators debate who won. But it didn't feel like a win-or-lose moment. It felt like a boundary being tested and held. By the next morning, headlines frame it dramatically. Keanu pushes back. Whoopi challenges Hollywood silence. The clips keep circulating. Behind the scenes, there's no blow-up. No shouting after the show. Just a disagreement that stayed respectful, but firm. And maybe that's why it resonated. No apology posts. No follow-up statements. No damage control. Just two people who didn't agree, and didn't pretend to. Now we want to hear from you. Was Keanu right to protect his boundaries? Or does influence demand something louder? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Final Take Files for more real talk show stories.